So welcome to Lunch and Learn. And today we're going to talk about misconceptions of online learning, specifically that you can't cover as much content online as you can face-to-face. And honestly, the information that we're going to talk about today applies to any course, whether it's online, hybrid, in-person, asynchronous, taking place on the moon, no matter where it is, this information applies. That's how good we are here at CCPOs. Your host today are myself, Karianne Sparks, and Dr. Laura Thompson. And we are going to talk about how to, really make the most out of our courses. So we're going to have a little introduction, identify main course objectives, talk about aligning content, visual brainstorming, and then we're going to end with a call to action. What can you do, either for next semester or, maybe when you have a little time, a break, sometime in 2030 or something. When you can, look at your courses and think about how you can, improve them. So have you ever felt like you've had too much content and not enough time to teach it? Yes, I see Jessica shaking her head. And I think, for those of us who've been here a while, we know that, originally courses were 16 weeks, right? Several years ago, we had 16-week courses, and then we shifted from 16-week to 15-week. And then when you add in things like reading days or election days, you start to feel like, where does the time go? And how am I going to provide all this information to my students when I have so little time? So today we want to talk about that feeling and how we can kind of do something about that feeling. So the first step is really prioritizing your information. There is a book, and now I know Laura sent me the title last time, I already forget it, but it's our faculty book club book down in Georgetown. Something to do with moments, but anyway, in that book, and Laura's going to help me out. I think she'll share it. The Power of Moments. Thank you, Laura. The Power of Moments. And in that book, they talk about actually course design programs, course design institutes. And they do an exercise with professors where they have them come in, and they ask the professors, for students that are going to be practicing whatever study or content that you teach, what do they really need to know as they go out into the workforce? And so they had the professors write down those things. And then they said, now, where in your courses do students learn that information? And the professors kind of shrugged because they said, you know what? We don't. That's not what we're addressing in our courses. So what we want to think about is, and this, is also called backwards planning, but how, at the end of our course, what skills do we want our students to have? What knowledge do we want to impart on them? What things do we want them to be able to do? And then plan backwards to how to get there. And I know you're probably thinking, Karianne, I don't want to have to think about this. This is a big project and I'm tired. And I have a solution. I'm very excited to tell you that this information already exists. We like acronyms here at Del Tech and in education in general. But so all of our courses have CCPOs, which are core course performance objectives. And they are right there in the syllabus for us to look at and to hopefully be able to then plan our courses looking at those objectives. So we are going to take a look at some CCPOs, and I will probably missay that because I get confused with all the different acronyms. So don't feel bad if you also forget between CCPOs and MPOs and, batting averages and all of that stuff. So here is a Business 101 course. I just kind of picked it because it was at the beginning of the alphabet and they're in alphabetical order. And right here, we have these core course performance objectives. And for this course, there are 5 of them. And you can see that they're very broad, but they really go towards not, mastering a simple task or an idea, but getting at those big, overarching themes that we want students to understand. So, understanding a business's impact on society, identifying the forms of organization, explaining principles of management or marketing, and understanding the functions of accounting and finance. So we already have, for all of our courses at Del Tech, this information laid out for us on the syllabus. So my suggestion is to then take these to use as your kind of focus or your priority when you're thinking about your courses. The next step is once you have those objectives, then you want to align your courses with those objectives, align course materials, assessments, and you want to think about the diversity of assessments and content and resources. I know, so I often teach history or political science, and in those courses, we've got a lot of voices from dead white guys, right? We hear a lot from them in history and political science. And while they have some important things to say, there are a lot of other voices that often don't get represented in our typical history or political science curriculums. So when I'm thinking about bringing, new information into my course or making sure my students are meeting those objectives, I also want to think about who else might I get, to have a representation in the course. So maybe I want to focus on, some women's voices or some voices of people of color or some voices of, we tend to talk about in history that the winners kind of, make the story or tell the story. So those people in history that maybe didn't win, as we would say. And this is important not only from a diversity perspective, but also because our students really deserve to be able to see themselves represented in our resources. And it doesn't matter what type of course you're teaching, if a student can identify with material in the course, that's going to make them feel like they belong and feel like that this matters to them. So how are we going to do all this? The first kind of method I'm going to show you is one that makes sense to me, but it may not make sense to you, and that's okay. We'll talk about some other options. But what makes sense to me is I figured I've got 5 objectives for this course. So I like a table, so I made a table where I had my objectives and then units and assessment, because I figured that would be where I would want to start as I'm planning the course. And so, I very simply said, well, each unit is going to address a specific objective. Sometimes that can work. Sometimes maybe if you have courses where the information overlaps, or you're building on information, you might have to finagle these things a little bit. But for the simplicity of our presentation today, I decided that we were going to do a unit addresses an objective. And then in the assessments, I thought, I want to make it straightforward and predictable for my students. I wanted students to know that for each unit, they would have a quiz and then they would have to complete part of their capstone project. So in a very basic way, I said, here are my objectives. This is when I'm going to teach them, and this is how I'm going to assess my student. Any questions so far? So thinking about this previous slide and about the table, have you ever made anything like that? Does it make sense to you and how your brain works, or is it something that you kind of can't see yourself doing? And I see Jessica was nodding.
And feel free to unmute if you would like to describe your process or to type it in the chat.
It's Jennifer. I was going to say that makes perfect sense. I mean, I think hopefully most people do that in one form or another, whether it's, doing a chart or outlining but making sure that what they're covering is aligning with those, course objectives and that they've met all the objectives. I think, hopefully everybody's going through that process in one form or another.
So then the next step is then to visualize what does it all look like as you start to add other content into your courses. And so I've given several examples because I don't want to assume that the way my brain works is the way everyone else's brain works. So what I did here was start to fill in. I added a 4th column of learning activities. And what I decided was that in this course, I was going to have 4 different types of learning activities for each unit. So I decided on an article, a video, an infographic, and an activity. And I just made up all of these things, which is the nice thing when you're doing a presentation. You can just make it up and imagine that all of these exist. And within each unit, I tried to think about, how could I represent, kind of multiple voices. So thinking about in the first unit, businesses' roles in the world, instead of, we tend to be America focused in America, but thinking about maybe how businesses operate differently in the world and how their roles may be a little different depending on what country they're in. And the other reason to have a variety of sources is because, as we all know as learners, some of us really learn well from videos. We like to have someone talking and explaining something to us. Others learn best if they can just focus on, print. Other people like infographics. And if you don't know what an infographic is, it's basically, think about like when you go to your doctor's office and they have pictures like, cover your nose when you sneeze. And then they have different things like this amount of bacteria has left your nose when you're sneezing. That's an infographic where you have a picture and then you have information added onto it. So the idea here is, again, to provide some predictability for our students, to provide a variety of resources, and also to really limit the amount of information we're giving students. We talk in CCIT a lot about, how our students access our courses and how they use them. And I forget who it was, but someone made the comment that, when we were all in school, we used a textbook and you knew very well when you were done. Like you finished that chapter, you were done, you could take a breath. In our courses now, they almost never end because there's always more resources. There's always more information out there. There's always more for our students. And I think sometimes that leads to fatigue and to feeling like, why do I have to click on yet another, piece of information? So I think as we are planning, it's just as important to make sure we have enough resources as it is to make sure we don't have too much and we're not overwhelming our students. Because more is not always better, especially when it comes to learning. So any questions about this kind of design? And again, you can see I wanted to do something kind of low tech. We don't always necessarily have to learn a new system in order to, kind of have a new way of thinking. And so for me, this just, again, makes sense. But we've got some other ideas. Another example comes from a course design program, and this is from the University of Calgary. And what they have people do is think about how their courses align in kind of a visual way. Now, to me, this would drive me crazy. But for some people, this way of thinking makes sense. They've got kind of the course outcomes on the left, and it looks like those would line up well with units because it's like animal and plant cells, and then inheritance, and then energy flow. And then they've got the different assignments that are going to be connected, the midterm, the final, and then the percentages. So, this is certainly another way to do it if this is how your brain works. And it can be really helpful for a lot of people to see that on a piece of paper and see that representation. Another option is a concept map. And I think with, certain courses that have a lot of complex ideas, this is a great way to go because not only are you making sure that you are addressing all the content, but you're showing how everything's interconnected. And I think a lot of times our students don't always get that second part. They don't always get how things are connected to each other. So if you're making this map and then you are planning your course accordingly, that can really help students make those connections. And you can even share this kind of thing with your students or have them create concept maps to try to connect information. And then a third way that, they've done this in the course design program is another table. And what they have they've kind of flipped it. So they've got the learning outcomes at the top or their objectives at the top. They've got all of their teaching and learning activities, and then they've got the specific assessments that go along with it. And they've got the percentages there and actually the days that they're going to do it. So they've done a good job of being very specific with their details.
Karianne, there was a question in the chat
Okay.
about the chart, for instance, the one that you had created in the Google Doc, if you would share that directly with students or not. I had provided one thought that it's definitely a tool for the instructor in designing the course, kind of how Jen had indicated that it would be a lovely thing if people were able to have that intentionality in the planning of their course. But I also thought you probably do share that information probably in like the course schedule that you create anyway, that it might not look quite like that Google Doc, but that Google Doc might be an inspiration for the course schedule. But I didn't know if you had other thoughts that you wanted to share as well on that topic.
I mean, I think you could certainly share it with students. I think I'm thought of it first as a planning document, really for the instructor to think about, how you're laying out your course. But I think sometimes we think it's self-evident how we've designed the course. Like, there are modules or there are weeks and everything progresses in the same way. But it's not always self-evident to students. And especially if they're taking 5 courses and they're all designed in different ways. So I think it could be really helpful to share this kind of information with the students to say, look, this is what I want you to learn as we go through this course. And this is when we're going to address these. And it actually helps. Laura and I talk a lot about metacognition, which is when you're thinking about your thinking. And when you're thinking about how you're thinking or how you're learning, it helps improve your learning. So for students to know that these are the objectives, that I am supposed to be learning about how businesses function in society, is really helpful and really important. And sometimes I think as instructors, we dive in really quick to the material. And so then we don't always give them that broad overview. So I think that, could be a way to be really helpful for them. And if they get to the end of Unit 1 and realize that they don't really understand that concept, then maybe you can, put in like a check-in to say, okay, we have finished Unit 1. Our goal was to understand how businesses, exist in society. Who can tell me, how they, some of the ways they exist, and who still feels like they don't really understand it. And that could be something private, that students could communicate with you. They wouldn't have to share with the entire class. But I think it could be really useful to kind of show students what's behind the curtain in the course, because I think sometimes students feel like they don't know what we're doing, even though we have a plan. But no, that's a great question. Thank you. Okay, so next up, we are going to look at one tech tool, and I promise it is not too complicated because I can use it, so it means it's pretty easy. So Dr. Laura Thompson introduced me to this tech tool, and it's called Wakelet. And I saw it described on YouTube as an online bulletin board for instructors. And so what you can do is you can start, so they call them spaces. So each board would be a space. And then on each space, you can tack up items. And so what I did was I put an item for each of the units in the course, or each of the objectives. And then within, and you could make a pretty picture here. I should have added pictures. And then within each item, you can add information. So, if you know that for every unit, you want to have an activity, an article, a video, an infographic, and then a quiz and part of your assessment, you can link to it all right here. And, if you really like this kind of tool where it helps you organize things all in one spot, this can be really helpful. But I was also thinking it can be helpful as you're going through the course, because we all know that as you're teaching, you start to see some things work and some things really do not work. But it can be hard to remember, especially if maybe you only teach this course every fall or every 2 years. So I was thinking that within the Wakelet, what you could do was I put a little note here. So I had my fake activity, and I said, this activity took twice as long as I thought. Next time I need to revamp it. Or you could put, like everyone failed the quiz. I don't know what happened, but we've got to change it up. So you can leave notes for yourself in Wakelet to help improve the course as it goes along. And I think it also helps limit the the amount of stuff that gets dumped in a course if you keep it organized this way. So you're streamlined and you're really only including those things that you think are absolutely necessary. We did add an infographic so you could see, did you already put that in the chat, Laura? No, okay. Just in case you're like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about when you say infographic. So these are infographics about, we can download it so we can get the big one. The impact of COVID on small businesses as of June 2020. So, you can see it shows pictures and then various information that goes along with it. And these are actually fun. If you've never assigned an infographic, they're actually a fun activity for students to do because they have to really kind of limit the amount of text that they add, but you want to make it kind of a standalone piece that's going to communicate the information that you want them to communicate. So they're actually fun. And I think students who are artistic, not me, my designs always look terrible, but students who are artistic like this kind of stuff. And so for those of you, we all have students who say that they don't dislike writing. This can be kind of a way to get them involved and interested because can be a little more fun. So that's an example of it.
Well, and one more thing, if you return to the Wakelet, we just wanted to be able to present different ways for you to organize information. That's why we use this. But one of the things I think is also nice is on the left-hand side, you see where it says explore. If you click there, you can see some other Wakelets that other people have made. And maybe you're looking for a resource on a particular topic. You can use the search to try to find something in justice, for instance, a topic like that, so that you are able to see some other resources that other people have developed. When you create your Wakelet, you have the opportunity to make it public or to keep it private. You don't have to make it. Not everyone will access it just because you make it.
Right.
But the idea is that when you've created something, you say, this is a great resource. I'd like to make it available for other people. Some people have done that in here, and that's why you can look into it to see if you can find other resources. So even if this isn't your cup of tea for organizing things, you might enjoy it for looking at other people's information.
Yeah. I'm super nosy, so I always like to see what other people are doing. And Wakelet is free, and you can, sign up. It's very easy. I do think we put in there a YouTube video that kind of goes more into how to use it, but it's pretty kind of user friendly, I would say. Some of our tools are not always user friendly, but that one is. So as we kind of wrap up a little bit, we want to talk about call to action, or kind of what can you do from this point as you're sitting here on a rainy Wednesday morning. And you might not be completely able to completely overhaul your course at this point. Some of us are barely walking, so I understand. But, you might look through your course after the semester has ended and look at your resources and see, are they relevant? Are they current? Are they applicable? Are they diverse? I've kind of stolen a thing. So in information literacy, we talk about the CRAP test, CRAAP, and that is looking at, is it a reliable current resource? So I've now gone to CRAD. If I can only have gotten it to CRUD, I think that would have been better, but I've gone to CRAD, which is current, relevant, applicable, and diverse. Sometimes we realize that we're using resources that are 10 or 15 years old because we think, well, 2005 wasn't that long ago, right? But sadly, it was, guys. It was a long time ago. So, looking through your resources to see if they're current, to see if they're still relevant for what your courses are teaching, and to see how diverse they are. Are they all coming from the same source or from the same type of person, or do you have a variety of voices in there? Also, looking at things in your courses that don't belong or could be mainstream or streamlined. I'm reminded of Marie Kondo, and she, picks up all your clothes and says, does it spark joy? Right. So if you have a resource that you're not that excited about, or you have an assignment that you hate, chances are your students probably hate it too. So if there's a way to change it and make it more interesting for all of you or more useful, why not take that opportunity? And then, I think sometimes we're afraid to get rid of resources because we, feel like, well, what if I need it again? So certainly you could make an additional resources folder for your students and pop that into D2O. And so then when students are, struggling with a certain topic, you can direct them to those resources. Or if they are really interested in a certain topic and want to do a deeper dive. And that way, students don't feel like they have to go through all those additional resources, but they can if they want to. I just wouldn't make that additional resources folder like 100 items, because that's scary for everybody. So I would limit it still to things that you think are useful and current and relevant, but maybe just don't have to be in the course that everyone has to, kind of read or review.
And we were talking about kind of continuing that closet analogy that, those skinny jeans that you keep just in case, maybe we don't need those skinny jeans and the extra resources anymore. We should just say the Marie Kondo thing, thank you for bringing me joy for many years, but I'm letting you go.
Exactly. Yes, because Laura asked how big the additional resources folder would be. And I said, it's got to fit under the bed, right? Like we have to think about that closet analogy. You don't want to clean out your closet, but then keep everything, in your car or in another closet or something. I do have 3 bags of clothes in my car right now that need to go to the thrift store, but anyway, maybe that's just me. So do you think that this would be useful for your courses to kind of go through and see, basically how things are going? And I think another fun thing, my idea of fun is not always students' ideas of fun, but I think another fun thing that you could do is, if you do have students who are kind of go-getters or who like finding information, that you could challenge them to say, hey, do you think you could find a better resource on resuscitation? Or do you think you could find, a better activity that we could do to explain supply and demand? And get their buy-in, and then if they do find you something, you can use that in the future. Sometimes our students are really good at doing research and finding things that we don't know about. Heck, it could be a TikTok video. Just depending on the topic, it could be something really helpful out there. So I think that's another thing, is to ask your students, what resources do they enjoy that you have, and what might they prefer, so that way they are feeling like they're participating and really part of them. We want to thank all of you for joining us for Lunch and Learn this semester. Laura and I think both really had a wonderful time. Next semester, this semester we did Misconceptions of Online Learning as our theme, and next semester we are going to tackle diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it will be every other Wednesday at 11 a.m. And we hope that, if you have a chance, that you're able to join us. As you can see, we're not too mean. We try to, be helpful and as useful as possible. So, if you ever have any questions about what we talk about in Lunch and Learn or anything else, that's related to CCIT, we are happy to answer your questions.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you so much.